Welcome everyone to this week's edition of our weekly video cast. This time we are actually going to be doing it live. As you're watching this, for those that are watching it live, enjoy. And those watching afterwards, you can follow along. But as normal, we're going to start off just sending some instructions to the participants. We're going to do a conversation today specifically about voice apps and voice assistants. But as we get people started, we are going to have them read a couple different things for instructions and what they need to do to participate in today's conversation. So today we have recruited somewhere between 40 and 50 people for the conversation. It will be a mix of general population people, but again, we're going to be talking specifically about voice apps, voice assistants, such as some of the speakers, to what people are using on their phone, what people think about them today, how they're being used, and then shifting into what potentially people want to look for in the future as they become more and more prevalent in how we interact with technology and computing devices going forward. So I think we're giving the folks a minute here to read through the instructions, make sure that they're all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and ask them if they're ready to get started. Hopefully everyone is. And from there, we'll start off the conversation. So participants are answering our first question, which is just if they're ready. I'm going to assume that they are all ready to go, but I reserve the right to change that if for some reason everyone is not ready to go. I think kind of what we're curious about today, there's a lot of talk about what voice apps are going to be in the future, how much time they're going to save us, and that being the big thing that's going to drive them into being used. So we're going to have that conversation a little bit, see if people believe that, where it's going to save them time, and then kind of going back into what they're looking for in the future versus what they're using it for today. So we're going to get started. I'm going to ask a quick warm-up question, a little bit more related to the topic for today, which is if you were to have a celebrity be the voice of a digital assistant, who would it be and why? So we're going to see the participants starting to respond to the question as we're waiting here. We have, again, it looks like we have about 47 participants, 48 participants online, and now they're just starting to talk. Keanu Reeves, because he's hot. I'm sure we'll see some different reasons and different people. Morgan Freeman, obviously, has a great voice, and I believe that's who Mark Zuckerberg has decided to use for his version of his own home voice assistant in his home when he was building that. So we're seeing a lot of Morgan Freeman, Mike Rowe, Kim Kardashian. I'm going to be honest, I don't actually know Kim Kardashian's voice as much, but more in terms of seeing pictures and videos and so forth online. So. All right, so we got about 30 seconds left. In this question, again, getting some differences. Kit Harington, Morgan Freeman, so calming, soothes the soul. Liam Neeson. Yeah, as we're getting through the rest of these voices, Gilbert Gottfried is a different one. I'm going to go ahead and prep for the next kind of statement and kind of transition the conversation into just what we're going to talk about today, and then go into some first questions around, are people using it? So, what voice assistant app do you use most? And one of those options is none. So we'll see if people are actually using them or not over here, and then we'll kind of go for the conversation. So we'll have a response back here in about 10 seconds, 9 seconds from the group. See what they use for voice apps and assistants, and then go be able to kind of get a gauge on that from the group. So it looks like Siri is the highest one, I'm going to kind of give them a perspective of what I use. I use Google Assistant home, / Google Home. Have an Android phone. I also have a Google Home at home. So going to see kind of what people think. So again, we're going to shift into this very specific topics right up front, which is there's a lot of talk about how voice is the future because of the time it can save moving forward. So I'm going to ask the group to first make an argument to the group for what is the way voice will save the most time and why. And then we're going to have them go. So while I'm waiting for those responses to start to come in from the group, I'm going to go ahead and just get a little bit of a peek at what the group said from in terms of what voice assistant they use the most. So it looks like we have Siri at the top, followed by Google Assistant Home, followed by none, followed by Alexa, and no one is using the Bixby Samsung voice option quite yet, or an other one quite yet. But I can also start to look at if there's any interesting. We asked a question up front specifically around technology adoption and whether they're the first one to get technology versus they stay away from technology. Just curious if those percentages change. If I look at very early adopters of technology, looks like you see that Alexa becomes a higher percentage of those people when you're talking about earlier technology versus Siri still being in the lead. And then if I were to look at the kind of people that do not adopt technology quite as quickly, you can see that they don't use voice assistants as much as the highest percentage versus Google Assistant Home being the second highest in terms of votes. Obviously, these are lower numbers, 18 participants. So it's not necessarily reflective of the whole population, but for this group, it's interesting to see that breakdown. So getting back to the question at hand, what makes the way that voice will save time the most and why? So you'll be able to speak what you want and get the results immediately. It allows you to have your hands free and do other things, so that multitasking aspect and so forth. So I'll dive into the responses to that question after I load the next question, which is what are your biggest concerns with voice being the main way of interacting with computers and technology? So as we're waiting for participants to answer that, I want to just quickly go in, see if I can understand overall what the group's perspective was. We saw some of those responses coming in as the participants were responding, saving time. You get results immediately because I can tell my phone specific commands instead of trying to find the app for that command. I think it'd be save time transcribing notes in class. Takes hands-free and so forth. Just faster. Don't have to dial numbers. Just say it. Voice saves the time typing and precious time getting to the information you need. So a lot around information or transcribing of thoughts on there. I'll kind of just quickly see, all right, is there any difference between the people that, for example, said none, what they said, specifically, I'm going to look at what those specific people said. Saves you time to look for open apps. Why both hands are currently in use for whatever reason versus, say, like people that use Siri, easy to use, save time for typing. It's just faster versus, let's see, people that use Alexa, what they said. Just speak what you want and get the results immediately. Save you from having to go out shopping. You can just order through your voice assistant. So obviously that's more of what people potentially using Alexa with the combination with Amazon, using it to purchase things and so forth. Now let's go into, all right, what are the biggest concerns with voice being the main way of interacting with computers and technology? It looks like initially just misunderstanding commands. I think that's a frustration right now. It's just that you have to say things in a very specific way sometimes or repeat yourself, and thus is it really saving you time, or is it saving you frustration from having to deal with it because you have to do things over and over again? So kind of in that way, I'm going to shift into just, do people find voice apps useful today or not? So I'm going to go back into that last question as we've done before, just to get a gauge of what people said. This first one is just misunderstood commands is the biggest concern or frustration. Yeah, same with the second thing. Frustration, computer doesn't understand what I'm saying, different accents and pronunciations and whatnot. Privacy is obviously an important thing in all of this, because the main kind of value of these assistants is that they're already always listening and always ready to go to be able to answer your question. So I think there's concerns about, are they always listening, and is that listening being used just to be prepared and ready to answer your questions, or is it being used to kind of in the background listen to conversations, and how is that conversation being parsed and recorded and potentially used or not used? So I think there's a lot of concerns there that definitely need to be worked out. And I think I've heard some people starting to talk about their concern that they're talking about something random, and then all of a sudden they're going to get advertisements about what they're talking about, even if they didn't really search for it, and just that invasion of privacy that comes along with these voice apps. So it looks like we have a group that says somewhat useful. I'm going to kind of go into again, go a little bit into the future. Imagine what would be where in the future they are really useful. So I'm just, before I go into that, I'm just going to quickly get a perspective. Looks like overall the group thinks they're useful. Both 50% say somewhat useful, 27% say very useful. Super useful. So we're going to go into the future for the year 2025. Tell the group a compelling story about how voice interaction has changed your life. So this is a little bit of a stretch, a little bit of creativity from the group. Interested to see what they think, and this is what we're trying to see. You know, what are the ways that people really value it versus where they're using it now. I think I had a conversation yesterday with a group of folks when we were talking about voice apps and assistants, and you kind of talk about all the things that it can do. It can give you information. It can give you, turn on your lights, change the temperature in your home, and do all the smart home things to lots of other things. But when we talked about, how are you actually using it? Most people said, I use it to check the weather, and I use it to set timers while I'm cooking, or set timers for other things in life. And that ended up being kind of across the room of the group of people that I was talking to, a lot of the main things that people talked about, versus a lot of the other uses that can be utilized with the voice assistants and speakers and so forth. So starting to get a perspective of what people are saying coming up around the stories around the future in 2025. I can now use my voice to access almost every command I can imagine. Instant access to information like textbooks or current events through voice. Someone has become rich. Congratulations to them. I felt ill, didn't have it in for me to type. Luckily, I had a voice Siri, I guess Siri 2020 is that person called it, to be able to then send information, whether that's through doctor or telemedicine or other thing, or to get something. Helps me do my job, reduces stress for me, and I'm more efficient. Call an ambulance, and they do it and save my life. So that's an interesting perspective. I see some things just around like making things easier, but as well as the kind of perspective of how that fits into maybe telemedicine and medical side of the world, which I don't know as well as being used as much currently. Now we're just going to quickly ask them, how's that different than how they are useful today? And as we're asking that question, I'm going to quickly dive in to see what people said. It looks like this first person pretty much used all the exciting technology that's supposedly on the horizon, flying Uber taxis, hyperloops, and space travel, all in one succinct answer here. Looking for the future. But instant access to information, no longer need keyboard for any of your devices, no longer have to type. Arthritis has improved. This kind of medical emergency use. this person has moving less, become friends with voice apps. So quite a mix of different things. Can kind of look through this and see, again, some in terms of being able to interact and order or request things that they may not be able to do as easily through voice right now, to some people just making it so that replacing the need to type and search through that process to gather and get information. So looking at how it's differently from today and in the future, looking at what people say, better integrated into technology. I think that's a big thing, is around that we have some competing platforms, you could say, in terms of the voice interaction. So how does that become better integrated across them? So it's easy that you know that you just need to ask this specific thing to this voice app, and that's what's going to happen. But you can almost ask anything, and it's going to be integrated in so many different devices that it'll route the request and go through in the right way. Cool. So we're going to have a couple more questions here to the group. Just very quickly, I want to ask them which of the following uses today is most valuable now. We gave a list of things such as smart home control, to information requests, to ordering things through e-commerce, to interaction. Recently realized that there's some, for example, guided meditation through the voice apps services available now. So where it's just kind of like an almost interactive interaction with the voice app that's going to then improve or help with something, versus just information one way and then back information. So looks like right now, again, and this kind of falls into that conversation I had with a group the other day around, like, what is it being most useful? It's just getting quick answers to things such as weather information and so forth. And I'm going to ask a little bit about why they feel that way. And I think that's all that we have for questions today from the group. So I have them answer this as they are. Again, as always, I'm just going to kind of quickly go through here and see what the group said. So yeah, get quick answers to things, hands-free controls. Second thing, smart home, lower e-commerce. So looks like people are not using it for that so much. The smart home control, e-commerce, interactive activities, again, the guided meditation, games, trivia, other things that can be utilized with the voice apps right now. It looks like that's not where people look to and find value for it. So on this one, we're going to actually be able to say and kind of connect the people from the last question. So people that said getting quick answers, we're going to be able to connect their answers to this specific question, and as well as to the how they answered other things. So I want to quickly be able to dive into that and kind of understand what we learned from the group today, what people are looking for, and what we're surprised by. I think I was a little bit surprised by how people find them to be useful today. I had maybe a little bit more pessimistic perspective coming into it, thinking that it wasn't, it's still in the novel side versus completely useful or very useful. But I think the group kind of went through and talked about how useful it was. And then now we're getting into where it's useful or where it's most valuable. And so kind of connecting those dots throughout the conversation. So for that's the last question I had for the group. So I'm actually going to go ahead and thank them for participating and have them go on their way. But while they're going on their way, I'm going to very quickly, again, I just want to get a little bit of a peek at that last question. Again, we have an understanding of what people find valuable. We're going to do some quick analysis here on the fly. So again, we did ask that question earlier in the session in terms of like how useful do you think voice apps are today? And we wanted to see, like, for the people that find it very useful or somewhat useful, where do they find it? It looks like very strongly on that 73% find getting quick answers on things is where it's most useful. So of the people that find voice apps useful, this is what they find to be most valuable right now. Whereas just curious, see what people that are obviously on the other side of it, less people whereas it's more of a mix between the hands-free control versus getting answers quickly. So it's not doesn't skew quite as nearly as strongly as the group that finds it useful is getting information very quickly. But I kind of want to dig kind of into that last question again before we go, where we ask them to tell them a bit more about you, why you feel that way, kind of to that specific answer. So if I wanted to look at the people in the last question that specifically said that getting quick answers on things such as weather and information, let's try to understand their drivers. What were they thinking? Why did they feel like that's the most important value? So again, we can kind of look here. I've like having instant answers to things like questions I have and weather information because I usually have so many other things to do. So the less time I have to spend finding the answer is something, the better. I also learned much more as well because it's so limited as it stands. Picture a future where it's integrated in everything you can have, your breakfast made, laundry done, and work notes taken with minimal involvement. It's all about convenience and accessible information because Alexa is smarter than Siri. So we have a little bit of a battle there. We need to know about weather emergencies to save lives, just easier. Kind of going into the people that said, for example, hands-free control. I think that was hands-free control reminders, timers, lists, very useful for me since I forget stuff that I prefer not to forget and fail to write down. Very Catholic. I think being able to use the phone hands-free in the car has saved many lives. So kind of just that ability to not be distracted, or just the ability to better multitask there. Curious, I know we had a couple people on smart home control and so forth. Smart home control is more valuable because it allows you to easily adjust your thermostat, for example, without interrupting what you're doing. So cool. Well, kind of good, interesting perspective, conversation. Again, trying to understand where the people overall that were found it to be valuable, find voice apps to be valuable, where they find it to be valuable, and kind of even just very quickly digging into why. But on that note, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. But thank you very much for watching the video. And for those watching live, thanks for enjoying the experience live. I will be also sharing the link for the reporting side of this conversation in the YouTube channel. So feel free to check it out there. On that note, have a great day.